So when Battle for Azeroth launches, we'll have the option of switching on War Mode. What I want to do in this video is to discuss the advantages of it, which actually seem to have been fairly well published, but also the disadvantages so that we can actually decide whether or not it'll be a good thing to do, especially if you're not a PvP-minded player. I'm also going to discuss some of the effects this might well have on people's experience out in the world. So in the Battle for Azeroth beta, we can actually now try out War Mode. In order to toggle it on, you must be in your main city. So for the Horde, you need to be in Orgrimmar. And when you switch it on, you get a nice little... For the Horde! Just like that. And for Alliance, you must be in Stormwind, where when you click it on, you get a... For the Alliance! Which actually, if I'm honest, sounds a lot too similar to an orc sound to me, but you could imagine it's a gruff Stormwind guard, I suppose. Now note that it does not allow you to turn this on in your main faction base on Kulturas or Zandalar in the new areas. This is very much, Stormwind is the main city of the Alliance, Orgrimmar is the main city of the Horde, that's where you switch it on. Remember, this isn't just for the new expansion, this will be for people in general. So what are the advantages if you haven't read about those? If you are in the process of leveling, then the advantage you get from this is plus 15% experience from killing monsters and completing quests. Now, that sounds quite good because, you know, you can level more quickly. But actually there's a disadvantage tied to that, but we'll come to that in a moment. The advantage once you get to level cap is that you get 10% extra gold and artifact power. But both of those advantages are fairly minor. In fact, for me, when I was looking at it and I just thought those were the advantages, I was thinking I wouldn't want to use War Mode as I was leveling up at all because the disadvantages are too great. So quickly going over those disadvantages. One bigger disadvantage is as you're leveling up from 110 to 119 inclusive, it's all fairly swimming. I've done it on a number of characters at various points in the alpha and beta. I've done it most often, of course, on a Retribution Paladin. And because we can't copy our characters, it's all been pre-made. So it's been pre-made gear. The pre-made gear starts off at roughly the same level as like Mythic Nighthold-ish gear. So you are going to be using your upgrades from quests as you get up there. In reality, if you're playing the game now, and it really doesn't matter at what level you're playing it, if you're playing the latest content at whatever mode, to begin with, you're not going to be accepting those upgrades. You're going to be better geared than the initial levels quest upgrades are going to give you. But one thing you notice, as soon as you get to level 120, you're going to get a smack in the mouth. I was pulling mobs as a Retribution Paladin, no problem at all. Taking on the 3-player elite bosses, little bosses out in the world for quests, no problem at all. Didn't break a sweat. As soon as I got to level 120, you know, attacking a couple of mobs and then a third or fourth adds in, I'm in a bit of trouble. I'm actually having to be very, very careful, and sometimes I'm having to use every trick in the book just to survive, and sometimes I'm actually just running away because it's not going to happen. The reason for this, of course, is because of the way the mobs scale. They scale with your level initially, but as soon as you get to level cap, they scale much higher because your gear is now crap. You're just in your leveling gear. You're going to fairly rapidly improve that with dungeon gear and also world quest gear, and maybe if you're leveling after the first week or so, you might have a ready source of BOEs on the auction house possibly. So they've set it at quite a high bench there, so you're going to find it a lot tougher. So there is an argument for not necessarily wanting to level as quickly as possible, because if you want to be able to complete certain quests in your starter zone, so Kulturas for the Alliance, Zandalar for the Horde, then you want to make sure you've got the essential quests done before you hit level cap. Otherwise, you're just giving yourself a harder time of it, and it could actually take you longer. However, if you think you can get enough of those quests done to get the reputation you're going to need to unlock world quests, and it's still not necessarily super 100% clear what that will entail, because bear in mind how it is now in the beta isn't necessarily how it will be when it goes live. Very frequently on betas and PTRs, it's the same thing. They give you an easier time of accessing content than might be the case when it goes live. However, if you can level in each of the zones, get enough reputations from the various factions to guarantee you'll be able to unlock the world quest, then sure, it might be an advantage to have that plus 15% experience, in which case, especially if you're going to level right at the start, when there can't possibly be any anime faction players in your zones, because they're leveling on the other continent as well, or the other islands, there's no consequences, are there? There's no consequences, so you might as well do it. A week or so later, or even a few days later, it might be a bit dodgy because, yes, there's certainly going to be other players. Because that is the other disadvantage. Once you get to the point where there are level cap players, they're going to be in all of the zones. You've got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Am I going to gain enough time from the plus 15% experience if people coming up to me and smacking me in the mouth as well? So you need to consider that. However, there is one big advantage to having war mode on, and as soon as I found out about this, it was like, actually, do you know what, I'm probably going to be putting war mode on as I level, and I might even have war mode on at level cap, although I'm still not certain of that. For clarification, I am someone who hates world PvP. I don't hate the concept of PvP in general in games, I just don't like the way it's done in World of Warcraft. I've played on a PvP server for some time, and that has been just because I've been chasing. That's where guilds are. You know, I want to raid. The raiding guilds are effectively almost all on PvP realms. For the last few years, whenever I've been looking around, there's never been one on a PvE realm recruiting my class. I've essentially been forced into a PvP situation. So for me, when they announced war mode, I thought it was brilliant. That means, okay, I can switch it off. I can choose to effectively be a PvE player. But here's the thing. Your PvP talents, which will work a little bit differently in Battle for Azeroth, you're going to get a choice of one, which is like the first row as it is in Legion, really similar. But then you just get to choose 3 others from the list of all the rest. So pick any 3 others, basically. Not only will those be active if you have war mode on for the purpose of killing other players or defending yourself against other players, they'll also work against NPCs. You don't have to be actively engaged with another player for those PvP talents to work. They will just work. And the reason for this makes perfect sense, is you have selected to play with war mode on. So that means you have chosen that at any moment someone can leap out at you and you're totally fine with that. You have now chosen to PvP. So why deprive you of those talents, even if you're just killing mobs? Blizzard have thought, no, we're going to let you use them at all times. So when you've got war mode on, remember, you're only going to be in a shard with other players with war mode on. You'll never come across players with war mode off. They're a different shard. So you can use them all the time. That's quite powerful, and that will, especially at level 120, you know, when, as I say, you're going to suddenly feel massively weaker until you can gear up a bit. That's really going to help. You can choose some PvP talents that are actually really good for PvE purposes. Amazing. That is actually pretty strong. So that brings me on to discussing what sort of situation we're going to arrive at here, because the way it was initially built with war mode sounded perfect to me. It meant the people who don't really want to PvP out in the world, they just want to mind their own business, get their quest done, they can choose to do that and never be bothered by enemy faction players. And those who wanted to do the world PvP, as it's laughably called in World of Warcraft, could do that. And they'd only ever come across players who were willing to do that. So that sounded ideal for both sides. And in fact, whenever I talked about world PvP before, I would always get several comments of people who were basically alluding to the fact that there's so many people who absolutely love the world PvP. To which I had to ask myself, so why do Blizzard need to put incentives in at all? Because by putting these incentives in, you are encouraging players who really don't want to do world PvP to do it because they're getting advantages with their PvE. And that doesn't sound ideal. Now, do I think Blizzard shouldn't have put those incentives in? No, I absolutely think they should have done, because I don't think there are very many people who do enjoy world PvP at all. And Blizzard clearly agree with me, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be putting in things that incentivize people to do this. So what's the situation going to be? Are we going to have this utopia where if you do want to world PvP, you will only be in a shard with other players who also want to do that? It's not looking like it. These are some strong bonuses. I'm not going to lie. These are very strong bonuses. We could well end up with a situation whereby it's just like playing on a world PvP server now. And that is to say, with the majority of people not wanting to bother anyone. Like, you know, I say I've played on PvP servers. I'm playing on one now. I can wander around. Hardly anyone ever bothers me. Even on weaker characters, you could argue that, you know, a strongly geared character like mine shouldn't really be bothered that much anyway. It's surprising how many people do, though. It doesn't usually end well for them. But even on my weaker characters who would absolutely get their asses kicked, most people just leave me alone. The vast majority of people just leave me alone. And that might be the situation we end up with there. If lots of people just decide the bonuses are so strong, I'm going to do that, you end up with a situation where you've basically created a load of shards with people who don't want to fight you, who don't want to go around PvPing. And in that case, are we really moving world PvP on in World of Warcraft? I'm going to think not. Now, that being said, don't take this as a strong endorsement that you absolutely should use war mode either for leveling or at level cap. For me, the jury is still out because there are still some things that, you know, tuning could change a few things. There could be a few other changes coming that make that decision a little bit different. But I'm going to be honest, at the moment, I'm definitely thinking of leveling with war mode on, even though I'm a little bit hesitant of leveling too quickly, as I say, because of the situation where if I feel I still need to do, as an Alliance player, some quests on Kul Tiras after level cap, well, I might have shot myself in the foot. Whereas if I don't, if I could just go straight to Zandalar, do those quests and get the world quests active, then okay, it's fine, it's all good. Plus, I'll have got the benefit of using those PvP talents. Whether I do so at level cap might depend on a few things. It'll just depend on my experiences. At the end of the day, if I go out doing some world quests and I'm constantly getting bothered by people who are from the opposite faction who are trying to beat me up or actually succeed in beating me up, especially if you get death squads going around doing that, then I'm also going to be of the mind that actually it's not going to be worth it and I'll just take it off. That's fine. There is another point to consider, and that is, someone said to me, okay, well, for World Quest, just like in Legion, you could use an add-on to get yourself in groups, go around in groups, safety in numbers. But again, to my mind, it might almost end up being a bit like Alterac Valley, where in theory people are joining these groups to get themselves involved in World Quest, but a lot of people don't, you know, quite like a good old scrap, a big old brawl, and it might end up that people are ignoring the World Quest and just having a giant scrap between one huge Alliance mob and a huge horde mob as well, which is, you know, is fun sometimes as well, but you can imagine someone who just wants to get the world quest done going bloody hellfire. So it's a new system. It's difficult to predict exactly how the community is going to take to it and exactly how they're going to behave with it, and I think it's going to be one of those where we'll just have to wait and see. But those are the advantages and the disadvantages to it, and those are sort of my thoughts on it as well. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.